Welcome everyone to another episode of Lunch Tech and Chat. A lot of exciting stuff has been happening in the world. William has been to the Bitcoin conference in Vegas, so I want to hear about that. There's some new releases from OpenAI, Microsoft, lots of stuff going on. We have been talking before the call. We don't have a lot of time today, so let's see how much we can cover. But let's start with the exciting conversation, which is the Bitcoin conference. How was that, Will?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was really, really good. So I went to the Bitcoin conference in Vegas that actually happened last week. So it's a annual conference that actually happens usually kind of like circulated about different places. And they last year it happened in Asia, so in Hong Kong, and I went to that one as well. But this was completely different story between the one that actually went to Asia and the one in the US. So when you mix a Bitcoin going through its all-time high, Trump family being fully involved in the mix, Vegas casino gambling plus Trump administration kind of essentially kind of like removing all barriers for everybody. I'll just let people kind of imagine what that mix actually looks like, and I wasn't disappointed by it. So
Just like people wearing gold and throwing money in the air,
no. So
driving Lamborghinis.
that is the crazy thing about it is that it was very, very different from other Web3 and Ethereum developer conferences that I have been in the last couple of years. This one, it didn't feel like just kind of like the hoodie guys and developers with Metallica and Black Sabbath kind of like, t-shirts or anything like that on Jandos. It wasn't like that. Like the crowd around the conference has completely changed. Pretty much, I would say a good third to even half of people that I saw around the conference were at either had a suit or were kind of, essentially kind of, just kind of like a founders like with like clean t-shirt, but actually not in jandals and things like that. So
Okay,
it's
so
very, very different.
no Lamborghinis.
There wasn't Lamborghinis. No, I didn't see that kind of like the original kind of like crowd of like the When Lambo crowd. It wasn't like that either.
Okay.
Um, it was I would say kind of like it felt like a bit of a city. You had people from all sorts and walks of life, but you
But
had that.
it wasn't like that sort of cult mentality of go to the moon, Bitcoin,
No, it wasn't. I didn't see like people with like gold chains and things like this actually walking around either. It was you. Of course, you still have bros and people with caps and all that kind of stuff. That crowd is always there.
That's part of the culture, yeah.
It's part of the culture, it's part of the ethos of the ecosystem, but you also see those people talking to people suited up to the bone that that have been in meetings rooms the whole day long kind of doing deals and
Me.
etc. So yeah, it's essentially kind
The
of like
me's of the
guys
world. The me's
guy,
of the world.
guys like you kind of doing that kind of stuff. But so yeah, I think and the interesting thing is that a lot of the companies that originally were kind of like developer driven companies that were kind of like the maintainers of the Bitcoin network and all that kind of stuff, they themselves are shifting the way that they are presenting themselves. So they are suiting it up, essentially,
Right.
for short.
They're getting
So
more professional.
not only getting more professional, they're actually bringing people that come from that background as well, and they essentially kind of like leveraging. So one clear company here, actually I'll name a name because that's everybody that actually has been around in the Bitcoin ecosystem will know them, is Blockstream.
Mhm.
So Blockstream essentially have some of the developers actually within Blockstream are some of the very early maintainers of the Bitcoin network. Some of them actually work directly with Satoshi actually from the get-go. Some of them actually are even suspected to be Satoshi. So I was
So there
in
was
this.
nobody in the conference claiming to be Satoshi.
No, no, there wasn't so much of that conversation, but um, I went on the plane from San Francisco to Las Vegas, and I was traveling right next to me, two of the guys from Blockstream, the CEO of Blockstream, Adam Back, which is actually one of the guys that have been building the Bitcoin network ever since 2008. So has been actually worked alongside with Satoshi and all that kind of stuff. Blockstream is pretty much like the main maintainer of the Bitcoin blockchain today, and from a developer perspective, and nowadays they have utilized all of their understanding of UTXO, et cetera, and they're actually selling Bitcoin products to the market. So they brought in place a guy, Sean Bill, which was actually a ex hedge fund manager, and the guys are now essentially structuring kind of financial products for Wall Street. So that's what those guys are becoming, right? From the early days of being developers, maintainers of the Bitcoin network to essentially fund managers. So it's very, very different. And essentially, I saw one or two interactions actually from their team on stage, and it was all about that, selling Bitcoin structured products to to Wall Street and
Well,
showing how they're doing it.
I don't think it's news to anyone the way that Bitcoin is sort of finding its place as like a long-term investment, like gold or like the replacement for US dollar, right? So that's the narrative that I think all those companies or all the people invested and involved to this ecosystem will be talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the people kind of like, you have like the group of like Maxi where essentially have like, 100% of the portfolio into Bitcoin. 100%. Those people were still in that kind of conference. Um, and then you have essentially the whole universe of, asset managers, fund managers, investment houses, commercial banks, pension funds, etc., all kind of also coming to it. Um, so and then kind of deciding what is it that they're gonna what is it that they're gonna do about it. The U.S. administration actually, kind of like going forward with um, regulating or deregulating, whichever way you actually want to see it, and allowing that to become part of the investment universe. So for anyone. So this is very clear. So that crowd was there. That crowd was in the rooms doing deals. The professional services and the companies kind of allowing them to do it were also there. The custodians, the broker dealers, fund administrators, everybody was also there. So that is set, right? So it's an asset class that has gained at least an open door on Wall Street. And I think on top of it, and this is the kind of, I guess, one of the underlying reasons why the investment flows have been going into it a little bit more, is that um, it's not only kind of like that, digital gold kind of like narrative around Bitcoin, but is also we are seeing now live. I mean, over the last 24, 48 hours or a week, everybody in the US is talking about financial and fiscal unsustainability of the US as a investment, as a government, and so they're navigating on that as well. On top of it, saying like, buy the insurance policy because we don't know what's the road
Yeah,
from here,
I was
right?
talking to my friend that lives in the US yesterday, and he was saying that his pension fund sort of profits has cut by half or something like that. He was like, it's a really scary time in the US. Like financially, everyone's scared of what's happening, what's going on, what's going to be for the future. The people that are really retired or about to be retired rely on pension funds and investments and etc. So yeah, so I think it's a good time for American people to start thinking about things like Bitcoin that are not intrinsically related somehow to the US economy, right?
I mean, it's really kind of like insurance policy that they're buying. They're buying insurance policy for what you call like monetary debasement. Essentially, kind of like um, a a government that cannot get out of its own debt cycle, right? And that's what we're seeing now. You know, like less 24 hours, 48 hours for those that are actually been following the whole kind of Elon Musk and Trump debacle. That's all about that. It's about kind of like there's just being like a bill put forward in front of the U.S. Congress, which will effectively increase over the last 10 years the U.S. debt by $4 trillion. That's what's in that bill. And now the U.S. is on its path to paying $1 trillion in payment in interest only on its debt, and you add another, $4 trillion worth of issuance, unless you have a GDP that catches up to it at the same level and the same pace. Eventually, that 1 trillion is going to become 2 trillions, and so on, right? So,
But
um,
that's the
in interest
foundation of
payment.
the US, right? Like since the US has become sort of the a monetary reserve for the world, like the US dollar is the main currency. They can just print as money as they want from thin air, and that's sort of what supports the whole economy. And US having the amounts of debt that they had, because if it was any other country with the amount of debt that they have, they would be completely broken.
No, I think this is not necessarily true. Kind of like there's always been, because you're the reserve, you pay interest on your own currency. Of course, there's a status around that, but that status, it's not the first time that actually happens in history, right? The pound and sterling in the past used to have that status, and it has lost its status. This was not that long ago, 70 years ago. And it had maintained that status for close to 200 years before that. So we're seeing some of that appearing again. There is one there's one law that has been put forward by actually a financial historian, that's called the Ferguson Law, which is essentially it's one of the indicators that says, like, from the moment that a empire starts paying more on its interest on its debt than it actually spends on its military as portion of the GDP. That's usually the moment that empires starts crashing. And we've just, over the last few quarters, crossed that threshold of the Ferguson Law, where actually the interest payments on the debt of the US have been above what the US invests into as percentage of its GDP on the military. And that curve is not coming down, and just less things on the administration. I don't think, unless they rack up actually the investments into the military to offset that somehow. Which, I mean, it would be crazy to be spending 10% of its GDP on military alone. Um, then uh, then we're way into that realm. But anyways, I don't want to over speculate on one
So
single indicator. There are many.
So just talking about the Bitcoin conference, can you, I don't know, name like 3 to 5 highlights that you can share with people that are listening to us today?
Yeah, I would say, like, highlight number one, Bitcoin as a digital asset, as an asset class, is definitely now within Wall
Materialize.
Street. It's
Yeah.
it's it's within Wall Street, right? So I think that's the highlight number one. Highlight number two is the actors involved on the Bitcoin network have completely changed. You have a much more diverse set of actors involved, not only developers, not only kind of Wall Street bets type of traders, retail traders. You also have companies, funds, uh, uh, both public and private companies, endowments, a universe of investors that are investing in Bitcoin as an asset class. Of course, the risk between and the allocation between those different parties is very different. Some of them is just 1%, 2%, just as a small hedge. Some of them as much as 20, 30% of their portfolio, and where they are in their life cycle. So that's number two, and number three, I think is just uh, the the number of products now coming out of Bitcoin are not necessarily only you go buy and hold Bitcoin anymore. There are products being structured around you know asset-backed lending, essentially, which is essentially you have your Bitcoin and you can utilize that as a backing asset for essentially borrowing. There's a whole bunch of companies actually kind of essentially focusing essentially on that, but there's also a whole structuring universe where you're going to be able to gain yield on your Bitcoin, because if there's a lender and a borrower, there's a yield to be actually be generated from that. There's a few companies working on that structuring, and then there's way more, I guess, complex capital structures as well from the fund managers like MicroStrategy. So Michael Saylor is a big name that's been operating this
It's
space.
so interesting how MicroStrategy sort of took the world on Bitcoin. McAfee and MicroStrategy, like they just went really early and put a lot of money on it.
I mean, they continue to buy, and I was in a couple of speeches where the head of treasury of MicroStrategy was explaining essentially how they are structuring actually their products to the market. Very interesting. It's very kind of Wall Street like, the way that those funds are actually structured. In the same thing like a Japanese player that is becoming also um, um, uh, quite important in that space, following on the footsteps of MicroStrategy, called MetaPlanet.
Nice.
They also doing fund structuring and like traditional finance fund structuring, and the way that they actually kind of like earning their money on the volatility of the underlying assets is also actually very interesting. Yeah, so it's very even Blockstream that actually I mentioned before is also on that game. So they are structuring products actually for Wall Street. From those some of those lending products where people actually can earn yield on Bitcoin, to all the way to just uh, a vanilla bread and butter ETF. So
How big was the conference, Will?
uh, this is probably the biggest Bitcoin conference that happens like around the world. Um, I mean, everybody from miners to those service providers to investment companies were there. Like,
How long was
uh,
it? Just a day or a week or a few
it
days?
was it ran actually the main conference ran for 3 days. For three
Yeah, I
days in
know
fact.
some people from the company that I work with there as well. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
very important. Like every major, I think, company and yeah, was represented there somehow, right?
Yeah, I kind of like went on a last minute type of fly, so I decided to go in on Friday. On Monday, I was flying.
And
So
why did you decide to go?
it was just because was starting to get messages from different parties, kind of saying, "Hey, I'm going to be in the conference. Are you going to be there?" And so on. So it's like I just wanted to be able to have like a one-on-one session with some of those players, like that. They were all coming, so I said like, well, it's worth for me to attend. So I was there for a very short period of time, just um, 3 days essentially, flying, fly out. So I couldn't do much of the gambling or poker playing or any of that kind of stuff. But I saw a lot of people in the casinos doing that. Sometimes a little bit like depressing. Seeing like grandmas is spending their retirement money on casinos. I used to say like, well, why are not spending time with your grandchildren or something like this? I saw a lot of women, older women, actually in those casinos, which was like, maybe it's not to my taste, but that's just
Yeah.
me. But also like, people just having a little bit of fun, gambling in the casinos. You have casinos everywhere. I don't know if you've been to Vegas,
I've been to Vegas before. I know what
but
it's like. Yeah.
every single hotel has a bunch of casinos and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. So,
Oh, nice. Um, uh, Jumping away from Bitcoin for a bit, I'm gonna give you a very quick update on the last things that have been happening in AI, and maybe at the end just ask a few questions and then we'll wrap it up.
yep.
So OpenAI is releasing a bunch of things, mainly in the GPT Enterprise workspace. So now there is a deep research that you can point to connectors. So you can connect to your own documents, you can connect to other things, websites, APIs, etc. So it's not just doing web search anymore. So imagine like a library or a company that has lots and lots of documents. Now you can do deep research use your own docs. Well, that links to search connectors using docs. So you can now do search or AI or GPTs using your own docs. There's a ChatGPT record mode that you can record and transcribe audio from sessions you're having. So that those bots that are listening to meetings and doing transcriptions and
Yeah.
etc. Lots and lots of new connectors: Dropbox, GitHub, Gmail, Google Calendar, Google Drive, HubSpot, Linear, Outlook Calendar, Outlook emails, SharePoints, and Teams.
Or using a MCP service in the
No,
main.
all using connectors from OpenAI Direct,
Okay.
but there is a MCP custom connector as well. So now you can connect to your own MCP and then just publish to the population of your
Nice.
team. You have to do that via the admin screen, and then you connect to the MCP. You create all the connectors, and you give your users access. There's some flexible pricing now, like you can add credits to existing workspaces across the enterprise, so you can get access to other things that you would be paying additional on top.
Yeah.
um, those are the main things on OpenAI. There are a few things as well on Microsoft. So Microsoft Enterprise has released Microsoft Research, which is deep research using your documents stored in SharePoint plus web search or the documents you want.
Mhm.
There's Microsoft Video Generator, so you can like chuck in a PowerPoint and it generates a video from the PowerPoint. It's not a video in the sense of generating cinematic videos. It's like a narrative of a PowerPoint presentation. There's Microsoft Notebook, which is just like Notebook LM from Google. You can use your Microsoft documents and then it creates audio and you can query and ask questions, same as Notebook LM,
Yeah.
but you can't export the audio. You can listen to the audio, but you can't export and you can't give other people access. I don't know why. And there's something called Microsoft Analyst that is
Mm.
to do maths and calculations and things like that. So it's an agent that is more mathematical. I think
That's cool.
those
Yeah.
the
Okay.
main things. And there's a lot of new platforms for building your own solution. So you mentioned one today, like vibe coding, you write what you want. So there's
Yeah.
one called Emergent. There's a new one from Google that is, what is it called? The one from Google. There's a new one from Google that I was playing the other day,
It's
which
like
is
the Google IDE also kind of like um
no, there's something called AI Agent Hub. So it's
yeah.
a interface inside a Google AI Studio for
Mhm.
app creation as well. It creates in the Google platform and others that are coming up. So in a very quick summary, I think those are the main things that have been happening lately.
Yeah, cool. I have actually experimented last night with the Verso app for AI agents, which is essentially kind of like a framework that allows you to build web pages and web apps by essentially just giving it a few prompts. It's pretty crazy how quick it is to do. I built 3 apps in 15 minutes. Built, deployed, hosted, etc. in 15 minutes
And
was
how does that work? Do you pay for the hosting in the end? Is that how it works?
No,
How do they make
it's
money?
you have 200 projects for free
Yeah.
per
But then
month.
you build the project, do you host it yourself or does I host it for you?
Yeah, it was just like hosted on this Verso app kind of like domain. And I think if you want to change just the domain, that you have like to do the domain change, but that shouldn't be actually a big thing. I haven't tested that part yet. And then on the same app, you can also do the backend part. You can actually connect that to Reddit, Redis, Postgres databases, etc. Or even like to vector data, some vector databases. I think Superbase is in there. And then you can have essentially kind of almost like a full stack app in just a few minutes. Of course, you always, depending on how the way you prompt things, you might have to
The
do some
I
upgrades,
think
but
I think the way that these vibe coding tools are gonna get amazing is to the point that you ask something and it just drives you through the creation. So let's say I'll give you an example,
mm,
right? So you say, I want to create a platform XYZ, like I want to create a clone of Spotify. So instead of just creating the app, the point that the AI will drive you like, okay, authentication screen, which authentications do you want
mm,
to have? I want to Google, Microsoft, and Facebook. I'll take you to the page for you to create your account, and then we'll take the link back and create the authentication for you. And then AI connection. Where do you want to connect your AI? I want to connect to Google, OpenAI, or whatever. Give
yeah,
me your key. You give the key. It creates the prompt, creates the connection. Like when it gets to that point, like creating the databases, creating the tables, doing the whole full stack working end-to-end application,
yeah.
that's the point that is gonna be like really amazing.
I
I
don't
mean,
think we're
I don't
I
I
don't
don't
think
say
we're I don't think we're too far away
no,
from
we're not too far from that. And I'm not saying that all the evolution that we had this far is not amazing. I think it is amazing. But in the point that we get that anyone can create an app, that's gonna be like a game changer. And the
yeah,
thing is,
yeah. I really think kind of like at the moment, like front end developers, they must be shitless
oh yeah,
scary.
hell yeah.
because because I don't they're gonna have to find some niche of what is it that they're gonna do next with some
And
of these apps.
something really interesting that is starting to pop up is coding agents that access your repository, and then you save the changes or you find bugs or on user reply, it just goes, checks out the code, make the changes, push back into your repo and deploy it for you. So now you can have like agents as backend developers doing changes to your existing code. Like
Mm.
this is pretty amazing. Like this is
Yeah, yeah.
creating an app from scratch, but is maintaining a solution with less people and potentially with no people, right?
I think it's definitely the direction of travel. I mean, and again, it's a recurring theme that we've been discussing. I think from a few weeks, but uh, what I see this is a huge liberating kind of like moment for founders and people that are essentially doing the business stuff, which is actually finding product market fit and marketing their products on to actually to consumers at the end of the day. For them this is hugely liberating, right? Like I mean myself, I'm not a full stack developer, but yesterday when I deployed 3 applications in 15 minutes, I was like, fuck, this is just so cool. um and then there's like, if I plug that at the back with the stuff that I do more kind of on a daily basis, like if I plug in some machine learning models at the back of it, plug some of those MCP servers off the back of it, and all that kind of stuff, and I'll mix the two. This is so fucking powerful, right? Like it's yeah, it doesn't have to be kind of like a customer facing or a product for a customer. It can be just some, hey, there's a whole bunch of pile of like creative ideas that I have just kind of sitting on the side there that I never had the time because it's time consuming to do a full stack up. I mean, it used to be like a full stack up yourself. All of a sudden, like this is very liberating if you have the imagination and the idea. I think so. It looks like it's like some guys kind of having a coffee, having some ideas, and a couple of hours later, kind of like they don't have like even to run a hackathon. They have hackathon. The hackathons are part of everyday life, kind of, you know. The exactly, yeah. I mean, I think the part that is still not, at least not yet, right there is like actually going from that, because I mean, once you reduce the barriers from a technology perspective, it reduces the barriers for everybody, right? It's not only you, it's everybody that reduces the barriers. So the real moat here is, and it has always been, but this is going to become very, very clear. Is the real moat is the distribution, right? Is how can you reach to the customers? You have like the social capital, if you will, to reach out to the buyers of those products and etc. That part is social, and this is inherently something that um, I think some developers, just by nature, sometimes of people are more introverts, and this is going to be a challenge for them because that requires you to get out of your butt and go and find social capital distribution channel. I think the the treasure of that crowd is going to be, the people that used to be developers that actually also invested some of their time to interact with other humans. Because they're going to be kind of like a cream, because they are going to be the next stage of what a BD person is traditionally not necessarily all that technical, but a developer that is actually quite social and actually is quite good at developing. And if he was actually quite social in terms of interacting with other humans, that's going to be a cream. It's going to be an absolute unicorn in this world. So because it's gonna keep developing that social aspect of selling essentially products and building on its own social capital to both raise money in the market, but also to distribute its products to end users. And I think this is where I see a lot of the potential, to be honest, because it's not no longer doing all of that coding or most of it. I mean, it might be doing still parts of it, but it will be doing a lot of the distribution um, of it. So, anyways, it's a brave new world. I love it. Yeah, maybe we should start actually calling this the founders chat or something like that, because that's what it is about, right? It's the all in founder conversation. Yeah. Yeah, the way that we're gonna have to educate those kids, and this is something that we can keep for another conversation as well. It's gonna be very different from the way that we were, you know, educated. Yeah, raised. Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Andre. Lovely to be here today. Okie dokie.